not offering an amendment? I just saw this 15, 20 minutes ago.
This exact exemptions were in the Bill and Finance Committee. It did not change from that at all.
Fair enough. Why are we not?
And as we came to the floor,
Senator,
when we came to the floor, did you offer an amendment?
One at a time. You're recognized for questions. You're recognized for answers.
So why are we not taxing Google, sir?
Because you did not put an amendment on the floor to put it into this bill.
Excuse me?
I didn't see an amendment. Nobody offered an amendment as this bill came to the floor on these services. The only amendment to this bill was the amendment I submitted.
No, I said, why doesn't your proposal tax Google?
I'm sorry.
Google, advertising.
Google. Because it's not in the bill.
Well, who wrote the bill? The amendment?
Well,
you?
This has been a team effort along the way as far as the ideas. I'm sure have you not seen the governor go across the state? You've seen us talk about it. I've put video after video after video out there for consumption. So, and all along the way, Senator, I don't recall a question from you or anybody else in the minority who came to me, or even my majority, asking that question. So that's probably why it's not in there.
Well, it must be a good question, and I'm asking it now. So give me an answer, sir, as a policy matter.
I've answered your question.
What was the answer?
Because nobody offered it into this, and it's not a one-person project.
Why didn't you offer it? Wouldn't that be fair?
Why didn't I offer it? Because I'll tell you what I was looking at with this bill.
Okay.
What I look at is population growth in West Virginia, period. What we've had is a significant population decline. And so as we're charged up here to work for the people of West Virginia, one of the things that's the number one threat for us is declining population. We're about to lose representatives in D.C., and here in about 10 years, if we don't change this at the rate we're going, we're not going to get that back. And so when it comes to big problems, big solutions are demanded. And when we came into looking at the things that actually affect population movement, the strongest correlation that I could see out there, and many others, in looking at what bills would be brought to the floor to address that problem, this is the one that just raises up there to get that done. Now, if you look at the other 9 states, 8 of them never had a personal income tax in the first place. You look at Alaska, they're the only state that's ever eliminated it. We would be the second. In doing that, I think it's a big idea, and is any idea that comes up here perfect? I'll be the first to tell you it's not perfect. But what I'll also tell you is there's not a thing up here going right now except for broadband expansion in West Virginia, and then adding this to it that I can say that I can hope that's going to bring with confidence population growth to the state of West Virginia.
Thank you,
so
sir.
That's why this is before us.
Thank you.
Further discussion. Senator from Boone.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the chairman continue to yield?
Will the senator yield? The senator yields.
Chairman, again, historically, we've always had a 6-year out-year plan. Has this been applied to that to see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the road if what's going to happen if this
so the plan contemplates any change going down, because what happens is that this thing works off of surpluses or spending decreases. If there's no surplus and no spending decrease relative to the budget, nothing moves over to reduce the PIT. Outside of that, it's a complete dollar-for-dollar revenue swap.
So historically, okay, again, what amazes me is that folks like Mark Mucco and those guys can predict things so accurately. I mean, it's amazing to me. Have they been involved in this at all?
Yeah, I've had plenty of discussion with Mark Mucco and Dave Hardy, a lot.
Sorry.
I've had plenty of discussion with Mark Mucco and Dave Hardy.
Okay. So they don't feel that down the road, if we eliminate $2.1 billion in personal income tax over whatever time period, in a $4.5 billion budget, that there won't be any deficits down the road?
So when you talk about eliminating the revenue, it's not elimination of the revenue, it's a swap of the revenue. So it's a fundamental change in how revenue comes into the state. So we already have very stable revenue sources. And this is one of the things we discussed yesterday in that symposium. If you were watching that, there was a strong nodding of the head and agreement on a couple things that I brought up as concerns to the governor. One of those is that personal income tax is a very stable revenue source for the state. It's very predictable. The other thing that's very stable and predictable are consumer sales and use taxes. So, and there, as you look into the things that are stable, you want to, if you're going to swap out a tax for a stable revenue source, then you want to use a stable when you're doing that dollar for dollar. If you have one that's not stable, not as predictable, and Mark Murikow, I agree, is incredibly talented, and even the ones that I would consider unpredictable, he's very good at. So we've had multiple discussions and working through these numbers to validate when we're putting this up, do you think this is accurate? And he'll go through and Mark can do a lot fast in his head, and then he goes and doubles and checks it with his numbers. And I've not seen anything that diminishes my confidence in these numbers with my conversations with Mark Murikow.
I guess being from coal country, if you would, these severance taxes, I know that's kind of I know we saw that in the governor's consideration, and I've looked at those. That's back into this amendment, correct?
Yes, this has the difference that's in this versus what you've probably seen before. Did you see the numbers from the symposium? I'll ask you a question back first, because there was 2 sets of numbers that came out, and that can be confusing, I realize. So initially, when he came out, the tiered severance amounts were different. They were higher than what they are now, as far as the sales would be lower before the tax came in. So now the sales are higher before they're taxed. And the way that his plan initially done it is that it put it in directly as considering in year 1 a tax decrease because of that. The amendment that we're discussing now, this doesn't do that. What it does is it takes as an increase in severance as these new tiers that he developed there from yesterday that he presented to everybody. Those tiers go into the SAFER fund. And the reason they would go into the SAFER fund, it's only if they get to that level. They may never get to that level. And if they don't, there's not $1 from that would go into the SAFER fund. That's one of the safety mechanisms in this bill. But if they do, even if it doesn't, if you had $97 million off 1 year in that increase, it doesn't trigger anything. The money is there so that we're not risking a loss of that by replacing a stable revenue source with an unstable revenue source. It only triggers in at 50% of that, because what will happen is that once it gets up above 100, 50 million then kicks over. So you could have 99 million, nothing happens. You get to 101 million, it's going to go down to 51 million, and then start working back up. And it's a smoothing mechanism, and that mechanism was developed from the Alaska experience, because Alaska used severance to eliminate their personal income tax. And they went through some trials and tribulations in that process. And what they did, in my conversations with Tax Foundation, looking at what mechanisms do you control for, because we've had blessings and we've had curses from being dependent on severance tax in West Virginia. And so the state that I could compare that to most readily, and there's a couple, Alaska was one, because Alaska's first, because they're the state that eliminated it using severance. They had a 90% loss of severance revenue in 1 year. Well, as you can imagine, that's an unstable source that was replacing a stable source of income. They didn't have this. So what they did really quickly is went in and put a smoothing mechanism in it. And now they've been able to ride the ups and downs of severance income and not have to worry about the pitfalls of it because of having such a smoothing mechanism.
My concern is counties, because that is a percentage of severance tax that goes back to these counties. And believe me, you don't have to tell me anything about the waxing and waning of severance taxes being from Boone County. We've gone from an incredibly good budget to an incredibly terrible budget based on totally dependence on coal. My concern is with these tiering of taxes, could that impact county budgets, because it is a percentage of severance tax?
Right, so you have to get way up before this thing starts triggering anything. So counties are going to be rolling in it before you ever trigger this. So
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Junior Senator from the 8th.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Would the senator from the 4th yield?
Will Senator yield? Senator will yield.
Yes, thank you, Senator. So the sales tax is increased by 2 percentage points from 6% to 8%, right?
That's correct.
So that's a 33% increase in sales taxes.
That'd be correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure that the public understands that type of increase. Thank you. You mentioned something in response to the senator from Ohio, and I'm going to go back to the rebates that
Senator, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that you're not misled. It is a 33%. This bill contemplates phasing out 100% of the personal income tax. Just so you know the swap.
No, I understand that's the goal, but I just want to make sure the public understands that
absolutely.
there's a sales,
Yeah,
excuse me, that there's a sales tax up 2 percentage point for 6% to 8%, and that is a 33% increase in sales tax.
And
I think you've already said yes to that.
It is, and that's what I'm
Thank
saying,
you.
but you can't, looking at that by itself,
Now,
does
I
not
wanna-
give the complete picture, so I just want to make sure you knew.
You've already said that 3 times, sir. Now, I want to go back to the rebates for people making $35,000 or less. And as I understand it, those will be cut off once the income tax goes down to 0%, correct?
Sure. Once the income tax is eliminated, the things that are going to that piece of the legislation, that all those tools to go down except for the SAFER fund and the rainy day and cap, those things that code then goes away. So yes, those rebates would then go away.
Okay. But people making $35,000, once that income tax goes down to 0%, has no rebate, and they still have the increase in sales tax, correct?
Well, let me address that. I think something that I actually forgot to describe in that. And
if you could say yes or no and then explain.
no, I'm going
I'd
to tell you
appreciate
how it works, because it's just saying it yes or no. You're trying to lead an answer that it would be a wrong answer. So what I'm going to tell you is in that SAFER fund, there's a mechanism in that bill that once the personal income tax is eliminated, that it goes back to eliminate the mechanisms that were used to eliminate the personal income tax as those surpluses continue to grow. So once the rebate would go away, the way that that's accounted for, aside from having eliminated all the personal income tax, which is a significant cash positive when you start going through and looking at what people spend on, that SAFER fund, that Stabilization and Future Economic Reform Fund, what that does is then has mechanisms to go in and reduce the tools for revenue that were used to eliminate that when surpluses are there to do it. And
What's the cap?
smooths
What?
it. Sorry, go ahead.
Are you finished, sir?
You may proceed.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad I'm not on finance. What is the cash positive for a family who's making $35,000?
Cash positive. So their personal income tax, hold on a second, goes down. I've got to pull these numbers back up for you. $35,000. That tax bracket drops from 4.5 to 2.71%, about 40%. So their personal income tax on that $35,000 at 4.5%, about $1,300 is what they're presently taxed on their personal income. It goes down to 2.71. So at about 2.71% of 35,000, you're going to have $1,300. It goes down to $750.
And those
And then they get a rebate on top of that, and the rebate's $50.
And that's for how big's the family? I think that's based upon one person. That doesn't take into account family size, does it?
It's household income, sir.
So it's one person, or it could be 2 people.
It could be 2 people.
But for a family of 5, 6, 7, it's not based upon that, is it?
It's based on household income.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, well, I guess 2 things. One, you mentioned the fact in response to the questions from the senator from Ohio that a lot of individuals came through the committee to testify or give you information personally on this bill. Is that correct?
And yes, sir. I talked to a lot of
Okay.
people on it.
Well, did you ever ask anyone making under $35,000 about your tax plan?
Certainly.
Oh, you did? Did they testify at committee?
Oh, not testifying in committee
Okay.
that I'm aware of. I didn't ask anybody's income that was in committee.
Well, I just think it's interesting. We've talked about a lot of industries and people that have come through your committee, and I just want to make sure, because I can't imagine anyone making under $35,000 would be for this plan. So can you name me one person that's for this plan?
Yeah, actually, I could name several within my own family because it's significant.
There's a lot of people in my family that think I'm great too, Senator. Is there anyone outside your family?
Yes. So you're talking about people that I talk to, and I talk to the same kind of people that you do, Senator. I talk to business associates. I talk to employees. I talk to friends. I talk to family. I talk to colleagues here in the Senate. What I don't do is go around and ask each one of them, how much do you make? But what I do know is that some of the people, the incomes vary significantly, and I have a reasonable idea of how that might be. And I can tell you that's taken into very strong consideration because some of my loved ones are in that tax bracket.
And you asked them about this?
Certainly.
Sure. Okay. But no one testified making under $35,000?
I did not ask any of those people to come in and testify in front of the committee, and as far as I can recall, nobody else did on the committee either that's made up of 11 Republicans and 9 Democrats.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Senator, you are the chairman of finance, are you not?
I am.
Yes. And you can dictate who comes before you or not, can't you?
No, any senator is welcome to invite somebody in front of the committee to speak. That's the way it is.
Senator, I think it's a cop-out by saying there are other people on your committee. You are the chairman.
Senator from Brooke.
Mr. President, it seems that the debate in here is taking on a little bit of an ad hominem style of the debate, and I wish that we could return to the confines of the legislation or the amendment before us.
To the members of the Senate, the point is well taken. From this point forward, we'll maintain the decorum of the Senate. Senator, Junior Senator from the 8th, do you have further questions?
Mr. President, I apologize, but I just thought the senator was the chairman of the committee. I've got one more question. You've said on a number of occasions that you believe that this tax plan will increase the population, and you've mentioned other states, but there's a big difference between correlation and causation, as I'm sure you're aware. Can you point me to any study that says, yes, if you get rid of the income tax, you will increase population?
Yeah, there's, I'm trying to remember the name of the book. There's a retired Federal Reserve chairman that did that correlation. And the correlation to population growth relative to reduction or the size of the personal income tax as it goes low relative to states that increase is about 40%. And that doesn't sound very high, but the reason is you have to think of all the things that actually affect the income and quality of life in a population. And so one of those things that could very significantly affect that is your dependence on severance, for instance. So if you have a very high severance revenue, and then you also have a personal income tax, maybe low, that high severance revenue, if it can replace it, some of those things that have a strong correlation to several metrics, and population growth is one of those. The others are the income per capita, it's a gross state product, and the labor force participation rate. And you can find those in Bureau of Labor Statistics, and you can also look in, I'm thinking it's Money Walks. I'll get the book for you. I'm losing the title of the book.
And you named a number of things there that I think would increase population, worker participation, and income growth. I think I agree with that. But what I'm asking for is anything specific, because we've been sold, not we, this legislature has sold the idea of reducing taxes for a full number of reasons. And you've said a number of times this will increase population. All I'm looking for is one study that says specifically you increase the income or you eliminate the income tax, your population will increase to the numbers that you've suggested.
There's several, and you can find them on the Tax Foundation's website.
Well, I mean, I appreciate that. The Tax Foundation, just like Planned Parenthood and Free and Now, they're all political entities. But if that's your only source, I guess that's the answer I'm going to take. Thank you.
Is there further discussion before I recognize the senator from Harrison for a second time? No other discussion. Senator from Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was asking questions earlier, and I'd ask that the senator yield further.
Senator yield.
I just want to be clear, I haven't had a chance to speak yet.
You've been recognized once before, though, so this is the second time.
Senator, I'm going to ask you to do me one favor, and you're like me, you talk a little fast. Would you talk a little slower? Because I'm just having a hard time understanding.
I apologize. I have a hard time
No, it's
hearing
not your
sometimes
fault.
as well.
I mean, no, listen, you're under the gun here. I know everybody gets excited, but Let me ask you a couple questions about how this stuff rolls out. Now, the sales tax increase, when does it become effective?
January 1, 2022.
Okay, and when does the elimination of the income tax begin?
It starts phasing down as well immediately.
Say it again.
It starts to phase down as well. As soon as you start to swap, you phase down the personal income tax. So the rate would be going down to 3.91%.
And what's the date of that?
After January 1st.
So the sales tax increases and the income tax comes
It
down at the
swaps
same
in
time?
real time.
You talked while I was speaking. Hold on.
It swaps in real time.
Swaps in real time, so same day. Okay, so the full sales tax increase takes effect on January 1.
It does.
But we only get a partial reduction in the income tax.
Correct, yes, because the phases down.
The what?
The personal income tax phases down. So the first reduction of that
Right.
is $818 million.
So just to be clear, folks are going to be paying the full sales tax increase, but only receiving a partial reduction in the income tax.
They will, but you also have to consider the things that are taxed are a very small portion of the things that a West Virginian buys.
Well, I'm going to get to that here in a second because you're taxing a lot of people I know, not a lot of people you know, but we'll get to that here in a second. So are there conditions on the phase down of the income tax?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand your question. Say that again.
No, that's all right. Are there conditions on the reduction in income taxes?
There is with the Safer Fund, because on that one, it triggers a 12.5 basis points. Once you get up above $100 million, it kicks it down 50 million at a time.
Will there be a further reduction in income tax after that initial reduction if the conditions are not met?
Correct. So what happens is that it can slow it or speed it up or stop it, depending on the revenue situation of the state.
So what you could have is the increase in all these sales taxes and other taxes, but the conditions not be met and there be no further decrease in the income tax. That's a possibility.
Yeah, I would say it's a very, very small possibility, but that we're having $10 billion coming to the state here this year out of the CARES Act or the Rescue
I know
Plan.
you're a physical therapist by profession. You got anybody who's calculated the odds on whether or not we'll meet those conditions? Things change all the time.
Oh, they do, and so I think this is probably, the governor said it yesterday, and I think he said it well, is that windows of opportunity sometimes can close fast on you, and I think that this is one of the biggest opportunities West Virginia has seen in a long, long time.
I'm just not hearing you. I don't know if I might be going deaf in here finally. I might have to give me some hearing aids. Say that one more time. How do you know that that's a small possibility other than your own belief?
Well, because one of the things here's how this tax is swapped. Personal income tax, you have to live and work or invest in West Virginia to pay the income tax. We have about a 50% labor participation rate, so that's between 16 and 65. So in any given year, that's around 800,000 people that are actually contributing to the personal income tax. When you use consumption-based taxes, it's not just West Virginians that are swapping out to cover that revenue, using a very stable source to replace also a very stable source. There are 36 million people a year that go through West Virginia and purchase the same things that 2% goes up on. So the pressure density on the person who lives, works, and invests in West Virginia significantly decreases.
I understand it's an incentive, but everything you've just said is pure speculation. I mean, there is nobody who has put pen to paper and figured out whether that is actually going to happen or whether there's even a way to predict that's going to happen. If I had you on the stand, there would be an objection because you would just be offering your opinion.
There was actually a study in 2018, and it was a tourism study that showed the people that actually passed through West Virginia, how long they stay, what they spent money on. So it's not speculation. It's pulled from that study.
It's not speculation that we may or may not reach the conditions that allow the additional decreases in the income tax.
Oh, yeah, the time. So I could, as far as actually timing it, there's not a timing, and there's not a set time phase where that happens that eliminate personal income tax. It is based on, once we make this swap, it's based on our control of government growth and spending, And then this will be the third year I expect we'll be passing a level flat budget, which we have a natural growth of about 3%, which brings about $136 million a year in natural growth. So every year we do not spend beyond what we've been doing, it adds another $136 million on top of the previous year's $136 million. That's part of this plan as well. It's very predictable. You can go back for 10, 20 years, and you can see that growth rate.
Has anybody done a look back and seen
Yes.
how this would play out for the last decade?
Yes.
Can we see it?
Well, I can get it. Yeah, I can do that for you. I don't have it here in front of me, but I can certainly get that to you.
Well, I know, but I mean, here I'm getting ready to vote on a major piece of legislation. You can understand that I would like to see that look back, wouldn't you?
Oh, I can see that, how we'd want to see a look back. And that's one of the things we go back and look is how would we apply it. And the thing that's really neat about this is it really gets down to that safer fund. Because if none of it happens, no change happens.
You know, Senator, I have a lot of faith in your intelligence and your ability. I'm just not willing to trust your word on this. I want to see it in writing. I'd sure like to see some experts provide some of the data you're talking about. I'd like to see the look back. But I'd most like to know, or most like to ask you this question, just to be clear, we are going to control the conditions that allow us to reduce income tax further by controlling the growth of government.
That's part of it.
That's part of it.
If you don't do it, we cannot eliminate it as fast.
That means not allowing government to grow for inflation or any of the other factors that cause it to increase.
It doesn't mean you can't. It just means if you do, if you go in and you increase your spending, then it has a direct impact on how fast we're able to eliminate the personal income tax for people of West Virginia.
Right, because if we hit a crisis, if we hit some kind of crisis like we did back in 15 and 16 and 17 when we could barely pay attention, let alone pay our bills, then this tax decrease, this income tax elimination won't happen unless we drastically cut government, will it?
No, I think you're misunderstanding that. No, because what would happen if you had a terrible collapse like we did back in, when was it when they came in? I think when we first came in back in 2015, there was a $250 million shortfall, and I think by the next year is about a $450 million shortfall. So we've seen some really tough times in West Virginia, and one of the reasons that we've seen some really tough times is what this bill addresses. So I'm glad you bring that up. That pressure density, as I said, personal income tax is something that is very stable, typically. But as our population diminishes, the number of people who are contributing to that personal income tax also decreases. And so in order to stabilize and protect from those kind of shortfalls, the more that you're able to spread that out across people, and what this does spreads it out from 800,000 people to about 36 million people going through West Virginia. So what would happen is if you had a shortfall in there, that safer fund, whatever revenue's in there, can be brought to match that suit before you ever get to Rainy Day A. And then Rainy Day A, we're not even touching that until it's capped at a 7-year rolling average of the budget, which this year would be about $1 billion.
How much is going to be in the Safer Fund this year?
The Safer Fund by the end of year one has about it's between 95 and 97 million. I have to look here.
I'm sorry, did you give me a number? I didn't understand it.
Yeah, sorry. Let me look at the number here. Is that better? I feel like I'm too bassy when I put it to got a big bass sound when I put it close and makes it harder to hear. In year one, the Safer Fund would have $97.95 million.
$97 million.
Yes, sir.
And where did you get that projection?
That projection comes out of having the $1 per pack on tobacco. That's what goes into the Safer Fund. That produces about $61 million. We would have, now you got to contemplate too, in that Safer Fund, that doesn't go toward elimination in year one because you haven't hit the $100 million trigger, because this is to stabilize potentially unstable revenue sources.
So it doesn't go in there in year one?
No. The money goes in there as a stabilizing factor for those unstable or unpredictable revenue sources.
Thank you, Senator. Permission to speak to the bill. Unanimous consent to speak to the amendment.
Senators can speak to the amendment.
Mr. President, I don't know how this body votes on this bill. With all due respect to the gentleman from Putnam, I mean, we're relying on his word for a lot of this. And I don't doubt his veracity and his truthfulness. I question his numbers. I mean, I'm an accountant and an attorney, and I can't comprehend a lot of what he's saying except that the conclusions sound good. The devil's in the details. You know, this is one senator's vision, and that's great. I mean, it sounds to me like if we can't meet the conditions to eliminate the income tax on the schedule that's laid out in this bill, which nobody can tell me we can, because nobody can predict 2 years from now or 3 years from now what's going to happen to oil and gas, what's going to happen to coal, what's going to happen to our population. We've lost over 60,000 in the last 5 years, and I predict that that will continue. But the lower income folks in the middle class are going to get left out in the cold, particularly if that income tax does not get eliminated on the schedule that's being told to us in this bill. Now, if it does get eliminated, you know, that's a huge chunk of our budget. And we're really going to pass this bill on 1 hour's deliberation, maybe 2, because we've been talking for a while. I mean, this is something that ought to be looked at by experts. We have experts. We have experts that can take this bill and dissect it and tell us exactly what's going to happen. And again, with all due respect to my friend from Putnam County, he's a physical therapist. We need to have somebody who's trained to look at this type of bill and the effects, the massive effects that it's going to have on the state of West Virginia. Now, you know, the people that I seem to like the best, which tend to be lawyers, architects, engineers, and the print media, are getting hammered by this bill. 8% in sales tax. That'll eliminate a whole bunch of our newspapers. Maybe that's the goal. 8% on the money that people who are injured in person or property get to receive in order to take care of their lives is going to get taxed at 8%. Maybe that's okay too. But I can tell you this, as much as reducing a physical therapist's ability to bill his patients and keep people from getting treatment, taking it away from injured people or people who have suffered injury to their property is equally as devastating. Now, I think this hurts the state. You know, it sounds great, it sounds good, but everybody is guessing at how it's going to turn out. And we shouldn't have to guess, because this majority, this Republican majority, came in on the mandate of transparency in government. Where's the opportunity to study this bill? Where is the opportunity to make sure that it's going to do the things that the gentleman certainly believes it's going to do? We haven't had it. We're violating our own rule to require a fiscal note for any bill that affects the tax revenues of any state or county government. And here we're dealing with a bill of such magnitude that it bankrupted the state of Kansas. Same kind of bill, bankrupted them. And we're going to jump off the cliff holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The lives of every West Virginian is at stake with this bill. The lives of every West Virginian and the future of this state hangs in the balance. The majority pretends like we're playing with monopoly money. We're not. This is real money. A major mistake will be impossible for this state to recover from, except in the decades to come. We're not playing with monopoly money. We're playing with the future of the state of West Virginia. I recommend a no vote on this amendment, Mr. President. I recommend that this body be given time to analyze this amendment and have experts report back to us so that we can make an intelligent vote and not a shot in the dark. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Senior Senator from the 5th.
The senior senator from the 4th yield.
Will the senator yield? The senator yields.
So when you were discussing the stabilization and future economic reform fund, and then you were talking about the surplus and how things triggered. However, you mentioned the tobacco tax. You mentioned the tobacco tax, but if I look at this as well, the proceeds from the additional tax on legal services provided on a contingency basis shall be deposited. It won't go in the general revenue fund. It will go in the stabilization and future economic reform fund. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So, in other words, some of the triggers that we have in are we're going to make the fund the safer fund or whatever it's called. We're going to make it cash rich by taking some of the revenues that should go to general revenue into this stabilization fund so that we can meet the next threshold of the personal income tax.
Yeah, that's correct. So one of the functions here is to stabilize the revenue sources in West Virginia, just from the Senator from Harris and I were discussing a minute ago about shortfalls we've had. And one of the problems that causes that is when you have certain types of revenue that they're very price sensitive, and so tobacco is one of those that's very price sensitive. And when you're going to look at how you change the structure of revenue that a state bases itself on, the more stable and predictable that revenue is, the more that we can plan to provide the government services that we provide. And the more that we can do that effectively, the less we have to reach into a West Virginian's pocket to do it. So those revenue sources that are either very price sensitive or very volatile are directed toward that safer fund.
Are there other taxes that are contemplated in this bill that go to that fund?
The ones that go to the fund are the surpluses after the rainy day cap. It goes, and then tobacco, a $1 increase per pack. There's a tax on the vaping product, 23 cents a milliliter, and then other tobacco products at 19.5 of wholesale. And the tobacco tax part of it is $61 million. The e-cig part of it is $3.75 million, and the other tobacco products is $8.2 million.
So the total amount estimated to go into the safer funds from all of these funds are what amount?
Well, for the first surplus that we dropped into that on year one, would be about $25 million, and so that's going to be $97.95 million.
So the contingency, the one I indicated on page 24 of the strike and insert, the contingency on legal services, what amount is that expected to generate?
That one is, hold on a second, I'll pull back. $20 million.
All right, thank you.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Marion wish to be recognized? Senator from Marion.
Amendment, Mr. President.
To proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am befuddled beyond belief here about what's going on. But one thing I won't do, Mr. President, I will not attack or mention another senator by name because of his or her position on this bill or any bill like has been done to me since I've came to this body. I've got too much respect for my colleagues to do that. But I will tell you this. I'm deeply concerned about the numbers that has been given to us today. Now, I might only have a high school education, but I'm going to tell you something. I'm not the warmest beer in the fridge either. And when I look at these numbers, and someone who has an income of $30,000 to $35,000 is going to get $50 back, and they think that's going to be okay, I question that. What if that individual smokes cigarettes? I wish they didn't. I really wish they didn't. But guess what? They do. What if that individual uses e-cigs? Wish they didn't, but maybe they do. What if they use other tobacco products? I wish they didn't, but unfortunately, they do. and to try to sell a bill of goods to make people think $50 in their pocket a year is going to make them better off today than they were yesterday? I'm sorry. I can't buy that. I cannot buy that. Mr. President, I may be new to the Senate, but I've been serving under this dome for 25 years. I'm not a freshman, and I'm not a sophomore. I understand what's going on here. And no one can candy coat or sugarcoat or try to flim-flam these numbers because it's just not going to work with me. I am not a freshman under this dome. It was mentioned that there were negotiations with 134 people. Well, make it 133, Mr. President, because I sure as heck wasn't invited to those negotiations. And we talked about a team effort. Guess I'm not on that team, Mr. President. There is no reason in God's name that this had to come at the final hour without giving everybody in this body the courtesy, the respect that they deserve to review this and get good, accurate numbers from experts in plenty of time to dissect this bill and decide if this is right for West Virginia. That's not how the process is intended to work. You know, we may be in the super minority, but each one of us represent as many people as you in the supermajority do. And it's not fair to our constituents that we've got to vote on something so massive at the 11th hour by arguments going back and forth across the aisle. Well, Mr. President, I looked at my crystal ball, and you're going to have 18 votes. There's no question in my mind about that. But I'm not sure that's what's right for West Virginia. This is a poor, poor, poor way to do business. I'm a no, and I encourage my colleagues to join me.
Is there further discussion? For I recognize the senator from Harrison for the third time. Senator yield. Senator yields.
Senator, I'm sorry. I can tell my president's getting tired of me, but, you know, getting this at the last minute, it raises questions that I'd like to have answered. You know, there's a disparity of sales taxes depending on where you're at. For example, folks who represent people on a contingency fee are getting charged 8%. I think it's called an excise tax, but it's a sales tax. But defense attorneys who charge an hourly rate are getting charged 3%. Is that correct?
Hourly rates are charged at 3% on professional services, and contingency settlements are charged at 8%.
Right, the fees charged 8%, correct?
The hourly rates, is that what you're referring to as a fee, is at 3%?
No, the contingency fees.
Contingency fee is at 8%.
Yeah. I think a court's going to say that's all sales tax, and I was just wondering, did you have an opportunity to ask or have somebody who's proficient in that area of the law determine whether that violated the Equal Protection Clause?
Yeah, we actually talked about equal protection quite a bit, and I'm going to get a little bit of a reminder here from just a second. Yeah, the legal opinion on that was that it's a different kind of commodity and subject to an excise tax and not a sales tax.
And I think that's a distinction without a difference, but we'll see. I'm sure somebody will take that up in court. Did you know that West Virginia adopted the streamlined sales and use tax agreement in 2005?
Streamlined sales and use tax. I'm familiar with that as well.
Did you know we adopted it?
Yes, it's been brought up to me, yes.
You know it's the law in West Virginia?
Yes.
And do discrepancies in taxation amongst similar revenue streams, does it violate that act?
This doesn't, because it was determined to be, at least for the counsel that I took, it'd be an excise versus a sales.
So you think all we needed to do was call it an excise tax as opposed to a sales tax, and it avoids all of the violations of the law that disparity in the tax rates might raise?
Yeah, excise tax relates to things that are a much smaller group, whereas when you have a sales tax, it applies to a much broader, and that was the distinction.
You think there's a difference in the group of defense attorneys versus plaintiffs' lawyers? Because I hate to tell you, there's more defense lawyers in this state than there will ever be plaintiffs' lawyers. But
Yeah, the difference is what you're taxing, not the person you're taxing.
we're taxing fees in both cases, just one's hourly and one's contingent, right?
Yes.
Well,
One, you have a contingency fee that's based on an award. So I'm sure you're an attorney, so I would
like
sure
my
you
friend,
know.
like my friend from Marion County, I'm going to make a prediction that that one will be resolved by a court of law. Thank you, sir.
Is there further discussion? Recognized to close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I can't let it go for a second here, and I didn't want to come across sounding egotistical at all, but I can't address or go without addressing when I'm attacked personally, when policy is hard to fight. And so it was made to comment just a physical therapist. What many people may not know, because I'm probably recognized for my physical therapy businesses more than some of the other, I also have a master's in business administration. I started my first business when I was 24 years old. And I did that coming from a family that I had to go when I was growing up to borrow houses, living in borrowed trailers, and sometimes wondering where we were going to get our food from next. I got married in high school. I had my first child 5 days after high school graduation, and I'm still married to that beautiful woman. At 24, I started my first business as a physical therapist. Now, when I did that, I had a bachelor's in health science and then went through and got a physical therapy license. I went back to school and got a doctorate in physical therapy. A doctorate in physical therapy requires an incredible amount of statistical math, for those of you that don't know it. And beyond that, I have a master's in business administration, and now I own 30 businesses in 10 different industries. They range from professional services to retail to technical trades to marketing and fitness, which is also taxed in this at 8%. So, although I love the fact that I am a physical therapist, and just not long ago, I believe it was even the senator from Harrison, that was talking about, along with many others in this body, how much respect they have for the trade of physical therapy. So I'm just going to take a little bit of offense to that, and then I'll get on to the bill. So, yeah, I know numbers. And aside from that, I know how to research. And I know how to do budgets, because I've consulted a lot of businesses and turned them around. I've acquired a lot of businesses and turned them around. I've went in and volunteered services to lift businesses off the ground. And now I serve as the chair of finance in this beautiful body. And I don't think that's just by circumstance. So the amendment before us is essentially the bill that would be adopted, because this is on third reading with right to amend. Should we adopt this amendment, this bill, then we're voting on the bill that we just debated. What I can tell you is the reason that this path was chosen is because the number one problem that affects this state is loss of population. And when you look at things that affect population and movement, quality of life is way up there, right? We don't have beaches here in West Virginia. But you know what? Some of the states that don't have beaches don't have a personal income tax and have more people moving to them than any other in the country. There's a study just recently that U-Haul put out from their own numbers. Tennessee, who has no personal income tax, also has a lot of extraction in there, like West Virginia, a lot of tourism, like West Virginia, had the most one-way moves throughout this past year in U-Haul. We are in a mobile society right now. We got broadband going across this state that is being deployed like we've never seen it go before, and we got more and more money coming from the federal government. And issues we've just handled here recently in making sure that we can deploy that internet. We have a mobile workforce. 15.9 million people moved to be able to work remotely here over this past year for remote work alone. In doing that, those movements are going from vertical cities to places like little old West Virginia because they don't have to work in bricks and mortar. This is our time to shine, Mr. President. This is the time where we can actually do something that moves the needle on population growth. And it's not a guess, it's not just a hope, it's looking at who's done it before, how they did it, the mistakes that they made, avoiding those mistakes, and reproducing their successes. And one of those mistakes that we are avoiding is Kansas. This is set up to make sure that it's budget hole proof. That's the bill you have before you. It's also a bill that protects the bond rating like it's never been protected in West Virginia. Mr. President, I urge adoption.
Question before the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the senior senator from the 4th. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The clerk will read the bill a third time.
Engrossed House Bill 3300 relating to reducing personal income tax rates generally. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage bill. Senior senator from the 4th.
Mr. President, my explanation of the strike and insert amendment just adopted by the Senate pretty much explains the provisions of this bill. I urge adoption.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? Senior senator from the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Point of inquiry.
Proceed.
So, Mr. President, you're in charge of making sure there's order and that the rules are followed as our president, so I just have some questions. Right now, we are on the bill. Is that correct? We're not on the amendment?
You're going to have to restate your question because I'm having a hard time understanding you.
Okay, Mr. President, as I mentioned, you are one that's responsible for order in this chamber as president and making sure the rules are followed. And my inquiry, my first one is that we are now on the bill, not the amendment.
Correct.
Okay. The second question of inquiry I have, Mr. President, is would you agree that the strike and assert, which drastically changed the bill, wasn't revealed to many of the members or the public only 30 hours or 30 minutes before starting the discussion of this bill on the floor? Is that correct?
It's going through the normal orders of the amendment book.
My question is, when was this amendment given to the members and also given to the public prior to the starting of the discussion of this bill?
It was filed at 4 o'clock this afternoon.
Well, that's not when a lot of people saw it, but
That's
Mr.
what
President,
the clerk's
would
office
you
just told me.
also, point of inquiry, would you agree that in such an important piece of legislation that talks about any changing or modifying existing tax and taxation and rates, that we should have all the information that is required to make a prudent decision on this bill? Would you agree to that?
Senior Senator from the 16th, the chair's position on this is to leave that up to the objection of the body. Okay? It's the body's determination for that. Maybe I should elaborate just a little bit more, and that is not any components of this bill or that we have before us now that haven't been discussed in detail throughout this session from actually close to the beginning of the session. What we're dealing with here today is a bill that has certain components, some put into one bill. So everything's been vetted at one point that's in this bill. Further questions?
Well, no, Mr. President, I have a point of order.
Point of order?
Yes, sir. And so it is the right of the members and, of course, the people to have a certain aspect of information, and that you, as the guardian of the Senate rules to allow for this to happen, the senator from Cabell actually made a point of order, and you ruled him out of order because it was on an amendment stage and not the bill of Senate Rule 15A, which reads, any bill which in any manner changes or modifies any existing tax or rate of taxation, such bill shall have attached thereto a fiscal note. So, Mr. President, I'm asking that a copy of that note that shows the fiscal impact on the people of West Virginia, the people of my district, the people of West Virginia, be given to me and given to the public prior to the decision of this, because our rules require that we have such information so we can make the decision.
Senator, your point's not well taken. The reason for that is that this is a House bill and it has a fiscal note. Do you have another point?
Mr. President, I don't have the fiscal note, so I'm asking for a copy of it.
You can get it electronically.
It's not on the electronics, Mr. President. If someone could give me a copy of the fiscal note, since we seem to, everybody
Is there
seems to
further
know it.
discussion?
Mr. President,
If not,
I still have a point of order that I'm asking for my fiscal note and the fiscal
your
impact.
point of order was not well taken.
Okay.
I've explained that. Do you have another point of order?
No, Mr. President,
Then-
I have a motion.
Then we will
I have a
proceed.
motion to challenge the decision of the chair on that point of order, and I'd ask for the yeas and the nays. Because you're not going to hide from the people of West Virginia the information about the fiscal impact. So I move
So
the
the
challenge
senator from 16th
against
appeal on the decision of the chair.
I challenge the chair, and I ask that I have moved to challenge the chair and ask that the yeas and nays be
The
taken.
yeas and nays have been demanded. This demand sustained. The demand is sustained. All those in favor, Senator from Brook, what purpose do you seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just an inquiry of the President. If I am in support of the President's position and the ruling of the Chair, what is the color in which a member should vote?
To sustain the decision of the chair, you should vote green.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine.
Question is, shall the decision share be sustained?
What purpose does
vote, Mr. President? The motion was made by the senator from the 16th. Is a yea vote support his motion, or does a yea vote support the position of the chair?
The yea vote is to support the position of the chair. Senator from Tucker and Wyoming. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 24 yeas, 10 nays, 0 absent, not voting. The decision of the chair has been upheld. Is there further discussion? Senator from Greenbrier.
Thank you, Mr. President. For the past year in COVID, I can't remember what day it is, but I'm pretty clear that earlier today, we considered a complete rewrite of the criminal code, which I believe was over 400 pages. And we decided as a body to turn that into a study resolution because it was so complex. I believe, if I remember discussion correctly, that issue's actually been worked on during off time for the past year. But now, this evening, we get a new personal income tax plan that affects over half of the state budget. And I mean, I've been refreshing the system all afternoon, and I just first saw it at 5 o'clock. And now we've got to vote on that tonight. So therefore, with that information in mind, I move that House Bill 3330 be re-referred to the Committee on Finance for the purpose of having a fiscal note on the bill with the proposed amendment adopted here.
Is there discussion on the gentleman's motion? All right. All those in favor of the senator from Greenbrier, roll call's been demanded, demand sustained, the demand is sustained. All those in favor of the gentleman's motion, the senator's motion from the Greenbrier will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine on this question. 11 yeas, 23 nays, 0 absent, or not voting. I declare the gentleman from Greenbrier's motion rejected. Is there further discussion? Senator from Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I did a little research while we were debating those last two motions. By the way, I'm still not sure how the penultimate motion turned out, but I'll accept everybody's word. I just happened to look down here for other states that had no income tax, because evidently they're amassing at the border, getting ready to run over as soon as we pass this bill. And just so you know, Wyoming, that has no income tax, grew at an astounding rate of 0.2% in the last 10 years. And Alaska, that has no income tax and could certainly be comparable to its ruggedness to West Virginia, lost population. So, folks, before you vote on this blindly, think about what it's really going to do to our state. I urge a no vote, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Boone.
President, I'll also rise in opposition to this bill. Over the past 20 years, the rich have gotten a lot richer and the poor has gotten a lot poorer. That's well documented throughout. I personally will gain, in all probability, by the passage of this bill that would eliminate income tax. And I think anybody that makes over $100,000 or $300,000 or $500,000, they're gonna win. They're gonna win. We're gonna shift the burden to people less well off, frequently much less well off. We're going to eliminate the dreams of the offspring of the less well off. Some of the other bills we've done in here is going to cut their ability to level the playing field by getting a good education. Mr. President, we have agencies, we have public health systems, we have frontline systems that are operating right now in a skeleton operation. We call them skeleton operations because they're there, yeah, they're there. The family resource networks, they're there. But they're not impacting anything because we don't fund them. So in order for us to cut taxes on the rich, we're not going to put money into broadband. We're going to cut these agencies that are skeleton operations already. 1.5%. We're going to cut higher education again. where we should be investing, we're taking away that money. And we're taking away that money so that the rich can get richer and the poor will be poorer. And it's going to be harder to break out of that cycle. If I thought people were going to come to West Virginia because we don't have a good personal income, we don't have a personal income tax, I'd vote green in a heartbeat. The problem is, that's not the issue. The issue is not having adequate infrastructure, not investing in things that can make our state better. We have a huge substance use disorder. We're not putting money into that. We can't, because we have to lower the tax on the rich. I urge a no vote.
Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just a lawyer, so I don't want to delve into the numbers of the tax bill too much, but I did want to keep the body honest here for a second, Mr. President. We were talking about Wyoming and Alaska earlier, so I got on the Google machine here in front of me, and in 2000, the population of Wyoming was 493,000 and some change. These are according to the U.S. federal census numbers. The estimated numbers, population-wise, for Wyoming in 2019 is 578,000 and some change. So that's a pretty healthy increase in population from 493,000 to 578,000. The state of Alaska, in 2000, they had a population of approximately 626,000 and some change, which is now estimated to be, as of 2019, 731,000 and some change. So again, in a 20-year period, we've got a pretty healthy increase on both Wyoming and Alaska. So I think anything we can do to be aspirational to those sort of population changes should be considered. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Cabell.
I have an inquiry under Rule 43.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, I will personally benefit significantly by the elimination of the income tax. So I'm asking the chair whether I should vote on this bill or not.
You're a member of a class, so you should vote on this bill, as all members in this chamber, if they have employment, which they do.
Thank you.
Junior Senator from the 8th.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I stand in opposition to the bill. So just as far as the numbers go, we've heard testimony, or what it was said on the floor today, that the sales tax will increase 33% on West Virginians, that most of the folks that we represent, most of the people in our districts are people who make under $35,000 a year, that they weren't called into committee to talk about this, to see whether or not the rebate checks would work for them, to see whether or not they would benefit from them. In fact, by adoption of the amendment, we've gone from zero on the bracket from 0 to 10,000, from the governor's plan to $350 rebate to now $250 rebate. No justification was given for that drop that we heard today with regard to the amendment. And I'm going to echo what the senator from Boone said, that what we do see in this bill is just a major shift. The folks who are barely getting by, and again, that tax rebate is only for a household, right? So we're not talking about one individual or two individuals, but potentially 3, 4, 5. Will barely get by and carry the burden for the top 1%, which will see an increase of 1,000 times their tax benefit. Those folks that fall under $35,000 will continue in this vicious cycle of poverty because their sales tax is increased. Everyone agrees, and I don't think anyone can disagree with that the sales tax is a regressive tax, that the income tax that we have in place is progressive and allows all of us, and allowed all of us, regardless of our backgrounds, to show up here in the Senate and be able to vote on this bill. And yet we could potentially take that away in adoption of this bill. In support of the idea, the belief that somehow this will increase the population by, well, it originally started off as 400,000, now estimates have gone down to 200,000, and again, no one said the reason why for that, but in support of the idea that this will somehow increase population, that this is the silver bullet, go to the tax foundation. Go to the tax foundation, which everyone knows. That's like saying go to ALEC. I pretty much feel comfortable with the fact that if I stood up and said, as a Democrat, go to the Heritage Foundation, everyone would look the other way. No unbiased entity has said categorically that if you drop income taxes, we'll raise population. Yet that's what we're being sold on. How about this is a way to increase population? Invest in infrastructure. Invest in public health care. Invest in education. No one moves to a state because of income taxes. Well, I guess if you're in Florida with a coastline, or Texas with a coastline and an immigration problem, I guarantee you Texas population has increased illegally, but it has nothing to do with their income tax policy. Yet that's what we're told to believe in support of this bill that burdens the majority of West Virginians. Period. No study can tell us how much services will cost if you've got to get haircuts for 3 kids, if you've got to feed 4 kids. This doesn't even out. This seems so simple to vote against this. I'm perplexed to a large degree because we're being told to buy into a fantasy in support of this bill. I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Before I recognize this, you want to close? Question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 18 yeas, 16 nays, 0 absent and not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. The clerk has the title amendment.
Committee on Finance moved to amend the title of the bill.
Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to withdraw the amendment.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. The clerk has another title amendment.
Senator Tarr moved to amend the title of the bill.
The question is on adoption of the title amendment. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the title amendment adopted. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 125, the budget bill. The bill was advanced to 3rd reading with the right to amend.
Are there amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senator Tarr moved to amend the bill on page 36, item 45.
Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none.
This amendment restores the
Senior
Communities and
Senator
Schools line item appropriation within the Department of Education to $4,900,000 at the level at which it was in the governor's proposed budget. Mr. President, I urge adoption.
Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? Excuse me. The question before the Senate is the adoption of the amendment offered by the Senator or Senior Senator from the 4th. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senators Ehlenfeld, Baldwin, Beach, Caputo, Jeffries, Lindsay, Plymel, Romano, Stallings, Unger, and Wolfel move to amend the bill on pages 58 and 59.
Senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. President. Quite simply, this amendment would give West Virginia State Police troopers a $2,000 raise across the board. The reason I'm offering this, Mr. President, is because we have a looming crisis in our state, and it deserves our attention. You talk to any police chief, you talk to any sheriff, you talk to any leader within the state police, and they'll tell you that their vacancies are up and applications for these positions are down. And this just is not only a West Virginia problem. The National Police Foundation reports that 86% of departments across the country are experiencing a shortage. And we have that shortage for a couple of reasons. One, pay is often better in the private sector. We have trouble in West Virginia keeping up with salaries offered by the energy industry. So not a bad thing that you can be paid well in that industry, but it makes it difficult for police departments to keep up. We also have trouble keeping up with salaries offered by departments in neighboring states. In addition, there's increased reluctance about law enforcement as a career. Scrutiny has never been greater upon law enforcement in our country, and it got even worse in 2020, and I don't have to remind you of what happened last year to cause that. Another factor pushing new recruits away, Mr. President, is the fact of job-related stress and PTSD, and many factors associated with suicide, which is now more common than dying in the line of duty by police. According to the CDC, police suicide rates run 40% higher than the general population. And so because of all of that, I've been approached, and others in this body have been approached by law enforcement to do something about it. So I don't stand alone in having been approached by members of the law enforcement community to do something about this. And so this session, Mr. President, the following bills were introduced. A bill to adopt an across-the-board pay increase for West Virginia State Police. A bill that would create a deferred retirement program to retain our most experienced troopers. A bill that would provide an exemption to all police officers from paying real estate taxes. A student loan repayment program for state police. Medical coverage for troopers injured in the line of duty. And a bill to address the underpayment of deputy sheriffs. Not one of these bills was deemed important enough to be run by any of your committees, Mr. President. Not one of them. You've got a crisis staring you right in the face, and it was ignored entirely, the entire session. Mr. President, you've said on prior occasions that you don't care if it's a Republican idea or Democrat idea, only if it's a good idea. I submit to you that it's a good idea to avoid a crisis in public safety in our state, and I urge adoption of this amendment.
Is there further discussion? Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, we had the Division of Homeland Security actually come present in front of Finance. We had the Division of Homeland Security actually come in and present in Finance Committee. And the proposed budget that the governor offered, and they came in and are presenting theirs, they made no request beyond what the governor also put in there. So I would oppose the gentleman's amendment just because it spends about $1.65 million above what the governor said they need and that they agreed to within that budget hearing, which is why we have those budget hearings in Senate Finance Committee. So I urge rejection of the amendment.
Is there further discussion? Junior Senator from the 8th.
Yes, Mr. President, I rise in support of the Senator from Ohio's amendment. Again, budgets are about priorities. Priorities. It's a priority to invest in law enforcement. Regardless of what came before Finance Committee, I can speak and support what the Senator from Ohio just said. Our law enforcement have asked us to raise wages. We have submitted a number of bills as a caucus to do so. None of those bills have seen the light of day. It seems like the majority is more interested in a tax cut for the top 1% than investing in our law enforcement. I urge support of the amendment.
Is there further discussion before I recognize the Senator from Ohio to close debate on his amendment? Senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's not that the state police don't want this raise. It's not that the state police colonel doesn't want this raise for his men and women. It's that some people are told not to come before committees and speak about what's in the best interest of their employees. So efforts were made to have that testimony before committees by me. So don't for a minute think that they don't want the raise. Don't think for a minute that they don't deserve the raise. Don't think for a minute that we don't have the money to give them the raise that they deserve. This is about public safety in West Virginia. And if you care about public safety in West Virginia, if you care about avoiding a crisis that is looming, that is coming to West Virginia, in fact, it's almost here already, Mr. President, I urge all of you to vote green. Thank you.
The question before the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the senator from Ohio. Roll call has been demanded. Is the demand sustained? The demand is sustained. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 12 yeas, 22 nays, 0 absent and not voting. Not more than a majority of those voting, I declare the gentleman's amendment rejected. Are there further amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senators Lindsay, Baldwin, Beach, Caputo, Ehlenfeld, Jeffries, Plymel, Romano, Stallings, Unger, and Wolfel move to amend the bill on page 67, item 83.
Junior Senator from the 8th.
Yes, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Junior Senator from the 8th.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This amendment would restore $500,000 for our seniors. As everyone, no one has struggled more, I would imagine and posit, coming out of COVID than our seniors, especially our seniors in their centers, specifically mine here in Kanawha County and Buffalo and Putnam County and in Bancroft. They provide essential services and meals on wheels and social opportunities for folks who don't get out much. And so I urge adoption of the amendment. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree those are great services. The problem with this amendment is that seniors are funded through the lottery, not the general revenue. And it proposes $500,000, but the governor's introduced budget, there's a $2 million improvement for those services. And the Senate's budget retains that, so I would urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment.
Is there further discussion? You wish to close debate? Junior Senator.
Mr. President,
from the 17th. Will the senator yield? The senator yields.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what you're saying is if we accept the gentleman's amendment, we will actually reduce monies allotted for potential seniors by $1.5 million?
Well, a couple of things. Yeah, actually, it would be a significant reduction because if we adopt the gentleman's amendment, seniors are funded. Those services are funded through lottery. So, and in the governor's introduced budget, there's a $2 million improvement. And so the Senate retains that. So, yeah, it's a significant loss. And then also, I'm not even sure that we can even fund it through that mechanism. And his amendment doesn't affect that $2 million. It's just that that's not how it's funded. That's not how the budget works.
Thank you. Thank
you. Junior Senator from the 8th, are you wishing to close?
No, I was going to ask the senator from the 4th to yield.
Senior Senator from the 4th yield. Senator yields.
As I understand it, the budget had $500,000 originally that was stripped out of it.
Yeah, so the part that ripped out, no, I don't think it was ripped out. What's happened is that when you as a legislator have any kind of thing that you're going to request for, you may have a problem, say you have a senior's home, the senior services home that's in your county. That center, say it has a hole in the roof or an air conditioner that goes out or something like that, it's not uncommon that you call the governor's office and ask them to, hey, I need some money down here for this senior center to help do this repair. So the line that you're looking at is not funding the things that you're mentioning. What that does do is it's when you make that request, that's where the governor would go to get those funds. Now the problem is that fund there's several little ones like that in different spots. So if that repair that you needed or several others started added up and got beyond $500,000, then there was a shortfall for the governor being able to fund those things outside of the budget. So when you made that request, and that's within his contingency ability. So what was happened here is that money was moved into a larger fund, I think, if I recall, that's now about $3 million. That allows a little flexibility of use in there so that it's not isolated down to a specific item, which is the way it was constrained before.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. President, I'll close. Or unless the senator from Cabell would like to speak before I close.
Senator from Cabell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the Chair of Finance continue to yield?
The senator yields.
I could be mistaken. Thank you for yielding. I could be mistaken. I was just told there may be as much as $70 million that's, for lack of a better term, not expended in the budget, unspent in the budget, unappropriated.
Yeah, there's $72 million unappropriated.
Unappropriated. So why in the heck, explain to me why we shouldn't give this extra $500,000 of the 70, did you say 72 million?
72 million unappropriated
Why
in this
would
budget. We have reduced the spending that much.
If we have, let me just, thank you. If we have $72 million of unappropriated money, why would we not support this amendment for $500,000 to be spent to assist our senior citizens who have supported us for all these many years? Why would you oppose, or do you oppose that?
I oppose to how it's happening because one of the things that we're fixing with this is being able to open up more money done that, and that's been done within this budget already.
Okay, so again, why are you opposing this?
I'm opposing it because there's now access to $3 million should those circumstances occur as opposed to $500,000.
I'm sure you value what our senior citizens have done for us. They've carried the state, they've worked, they've saved, they've supported us, they've educated us. I just don't understand.
Senator, and you know what? I certainly appreciate our seniors, and I think maybe I've probably got more experience, unless you work in a nursing home here, than probably most in this room working with seniors in my profession. So I certainly appreciate them, and in that appreciation, there's been a couple of things within this budget to help with that. One is there's a $2 million improvement in the budget, and then there was another moving out so that we aren't limited to $500,000 when contingencies are needed, up to $3 million in possibility. So the fact that we are not adopting this gentleman's amendment does not indicate a lack of support for seniors. It actually is quite the opposite in this budget, and I think there's quite a fallacy in your argument in insinuating that. So,
speak to the amendment.
Proceed.
I mean, I don't know what fallacy is that there is in this argument. Our seniors have been there for us. We have $72 million in unappropriated money. Our state has been through a pandemic of epic proportions. Our seniors have been locked up. They've not been able to see their family members. Many of them have been ill. So the fallacy in my argument, I really don't see it. What are we saving this money for, if not to look out for, feed, and help our senior citizens? I urge adoption of the amendment.
Is there further discussion? Does the junior senator wish to close the debate? Well, yeah, junior senator, proceed. You're closing debate.
I'm sorry, Mr. President?
Were you requesting to close debate?
Yes.
Proceed.
Thank you. Mr. President, I appreciate the explanations from the senator from the 4th District, from the 4th District. But in black and white, I'm looking at the Senate budget, decreases to the governor's introduced budget. These are the decreases, including seniors, which are decreases to the Mark Twain, to Jobs and Hope, EBA, WVU, Marshall University. But in seniors, the cut is $500,000. That's what the Senate Finance Committee produced to us in support of their budget, not some explanation put together on the floor at the last minute. I can read a budget. That's what it says. It's a decrease from the governor's budget of $500,000. And let me take a moment to remind this body that we passed Senate Resolution 33 earlier in the month, recognizing our senior centers. The fact that 2.5 million meals have been produced and distributed by them. The fact that 3.5 million hours of personal care have been provided to them. The fact that seniors are 20% of the population. So either that's just lip service or we're going to protect our seniors. Support my amendment. Thank you.
The question before the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the junior senator from the 8th. Roll call has been demanded. Is demand sustained? The demand is sustained. All those in favor of the junior senator from the 8th amendment will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 11 yeas, 23 nays, 0 absent, not voting. Just 1 second. I declare the amendment rejected. Are there further amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senators Lindsey, Baldwin, Beach, Caputo, Ehlenfeld, Jeffries, Plymel, Romano, Stallings, Unger, and Wolfel move to amend the bill on page 71, item 95.
Junior senator from the 8th.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. May I explain? Do I have unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read?
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Junior senator from the 8th.
Yes, Mr. President. My amendment would restore monies cut to higher ed, specifically would restore $225,846 to WVU Health Sciences, $34,301 to WVU Health Charleston, $33,530 to WVU Health Eastern, $183,526 to Marshall Medical School, $133,189 to West Virginia Osteopathic, $95,748 to Bluefield State College, $157,146 to Concord State University, $96,704 to Glenville State College, $109,257 to Shepherd University, $136,540 to West Liberty University, and $170,138 to my own West Virginia State University, for a total of $1,456,925. This is in response to the 1.5% cut to these institutions. I believe that we should not be cutting higher ed. I believe that, again, just as like seniors, the last thing we should be doing coming out of COVID crisis is cutting higher education. We should be supporting these institutions, and more importantly, the students that support them. I urge adoption.
Is there discussion? Senior senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to oppose the gentleman's amendment. And these are the 1.5% cuts that came through in these schools. And so one of the things that was done here is that letters were sent out to many of the agencies and institutions across the state and said a lot of efficiencies that have been found are where would you cut the 1.5%? And line items were given. In addition to that, I believe, Mr. President, you had a discussion with Gordon Gee and Jerry Gilbert with regards to do they think that they should also participate in the efforts that we were doing here? And they said that the 1.5% cuts within Marshall and WU were perfectly acceptable to them, if I recall that conversation correctly. So I would reject the amendment. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Would the junior senator from the 8th wish to close? Yes, Mr. President. That's okay. Proceed.
Yes. Maybe President Gilbert and Gee said that, but I don't know if the students were contacted. That's what's at stake, the students of these universities. Tuition has gone down, FAFSA applications have gone down as a consequence of COVID, and therefore, as a consequence, services to the students. This amendment is for higher ed, but more importantly, it's for our students. And just as the governor said yesterday, WVU is an economic engine. Marshall is an economic engine. I'm here to tell you, West Virginia State is an economic engine. They have a $72 million economic impact for the state of West Virginia, and in support of the personal income tax, we're going to ask them to take a 1.5% cut. Again, priorities. I urge adoption of the amendment. It's a no-brainer. Thank you.
Question before the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered. The question before the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the junior senator from the 8th. Roll call's been demanded. Is demand sustained? The demand is sustained. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine to ascertain the results. On this question, 11 yeas, 23 nays, 0 absent, not voting. I declare the amendment rejected. Are there further amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senators Wolfle, Baldwin, Beach, Caputo, Ehlenfeld, Jeffries, Lindsay, Plymel, Romano, Stallings, and Unger move to amend the bill on page 72, item 96.
Senator from Cabell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd request unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Cabell.
Thank you. Would the finance chair yield, please?
Senator yield?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator. I believe that you have an amendment later in the evening that will restore this money to Marshall and WVU. Is that correct?
It will take it up except for the 1.5%.
Thank you. I withdraw the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator's motion is withdraw the amendment. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Amendments withdrawn. Are there further amendments?
Yes, sir. Senators Plymel, Baldwin, Beach, Caputo, Ehlenfeld, Jeffries, Lindsay, Romano, Stallings, Unger, and Wolfle move to amend the bill on page 103, item 175.
Senior Senator from the 5th.
Request unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senior Senator from the 5th.
Thank you, Mr. President. In explaining this amendment, I'm going to go back a little bit in time in this past year. In September, I was called by the governor's office and talked to as a member of the Broadband Council, and we were talking about RDOF and supporting RDOF. That's the reverse auction. As you know, that we needed to put money aside for that, and I agreed with him. This is a good idea if we're going to do this. At the same time, we talked about future things, and then, so that was in September, and I participated in a statewide Zoom call with the governor in support of the plan to put money at the development office that would help with the funding of the RDOF proposals from state of West Virginia people. Well, what this amendment does is also takes the next thing that the governor did. The governor had a meeting and a press conference here at the Capitol outside. I wasn't quite invited to that one, but I agreed with him. He challenged, and I'll tell you what he said. I challenged the Democrats to buy in on this proposal, and that proposal for the next 3 years was to put $50 million in broadband. And what this amendment does, it fulfills that promise that I agree with him, and I agree that many of the members in this body were there with the governor saying, we're with you. So it's time to say, we're with you, Governor. So I urge the adoption of the amendment for $50 million in broadband from the unappropriated funds. Thank you.
Is there discussion? Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I'm going to rise in support of the gentleman's amendment. This just simply gives spending authority. So it's the spending authority would be there if it were needed, and really has no other impact on it. So I would support the gentleman's amendment.
Is there further discussion? Does the Senior Senator from the 5th wish to close? All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senior Senator from the 5th Amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senators Baldwin, Beach, Caputo, Ehlenfeld, Jeffries, Lindsay, Plymel, Romano, Stallings, Unger, and Wolfel move to amend the bill on page 159, item 301.
Senator from Greenbrier.
Thank you, Mr. President. Unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Greenbrier.
Thank you, Mr. President. Maybe we can continue that trend, although I doubt it. My amendment, quite simply, fully restores funding to the Educational Broadcasting Authority. My son has their app. We have the app. My son loves watching it for their educational programming. My family loves watching Mountain Stage. And the whole state benefits from the emergency alert system and the siren system that they help operate. So I urge adoption. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there discussion? Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to rise in opposition of the amendment. This overspends the governor's estimate for lottery by $3,830,691, and that makes this amendment unconstitutional.
Is there further discussion? Does the Senator from Greenbrier wish to close? Senator from Greenbrier.
I do, Mr. President. Thank you very much. I think we're going to take up another amendment on the Educational Broadcasting Authority in just a little bit, although it doesn't have a D's name beside it, and it also has a 1.5% cut. I'll support that because it's the right thing to do. I think full funding is really the right thing to do. But if that's the way we want to play it, and that's the way we want to play it. Thank you, Mr. President.
I recognize the Senator from Greenbrier to close debate, but the junior senator from 8th is wanting to speak. Do you still want us to speak to the bill?
I'm going to ask a question to the senator from the 4th, that's all.
Senator.
Yield. Will the senator yield?
Will the senator yield? The senator yields.
How is, you said that this request or this amendment is unconstitutional. Well, what does that mean?
Correct. This amendment would fund the EBA from lottery, but it overspends the governor's estimate, and we cannot overspend the estimate. That would be that we're constitutionally bound to not spending beyond the governor's estimate.
Well, but it's funded from the excess, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, it's funding from the lottery, and that is over the estimate of the governor by nearly $4 million. And that's something we are constitutionally bound. We cannot do that.
I'm just confused because it was part of the original budget. Now it's being cut out to support another measure that passed earlier. And I don't understand why it's unconstitutional. What's that based on? I mean,
because of where the money's coming from and overspending it.
I can't hear you.
Because of where the money's coming from and overspending it. They're overspending the estimate. I don't know how many other ways to say that.
But not for the overall budget. We're just deciding not to fund it, that's all.
Yeah, each fund has its own estimate, and we have general revenue, lottery, and excess lottery, and state road fund. Each of those funds have an estimate. We cannot overspend any one of those estimates.
But it was in the original budget.
It was funded in general revenue in the original budget.
Well, okay, why can't it be funded by general revenue now?
That's not what this amendment does.
Well, okay. Thank you, Mr. President.
Does the senator from Greenbrier wish to close debate again? Thank you. Okay. The question before the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the junior senator from the senator from Greenbrier. All the roll call was demanded. Demand sustained. Demand is sustained. All those in favor of the gentleman from Greenbrier's amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 11 yeas, 23 nays, 0 absent, not voting. I declare the amendment rejected. Are there further amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senators Trump, Weld, Nelson, and Takubo move to amend the bill on page 43, item 52, line 1.
Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Morgan.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to withdraw this amendment.
Senator from Morgan requests unanimous consent to withdraw his amendment. Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Are there further amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senators Beach, Baldwin, Caputo, Ehlenfeld, Jeffries, Lindsay, Plymel, Romano, Stallings, Unger, and Wolfel move to amend the bill on page 42, item 51.
Senator from Monongalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of it having read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Monongalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, this amendment before you is probably the simplest amendment you'll have before you this evening, and probably is the smallest dollar amount. It simply reinstates the $132,000 that was originally in the budget proposal by the government to the Library Commission.
Is there discussion? Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to rise in opposition to the amendment. As we went through and looked at items and requested those agencies to report back on lines that we were looking at, we was able to speak to the curator on this specific line. He assured me that this reduction is because of consolidating positions in a line that was recommended, and it has no effect on any of the services of the Library Commission offices. So essentially, it would not be funding the position. So I urge rejection of the amendment.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Monongalia, wish to close debate?
I do. Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, what you have here is a piece of legislation or an amendment taking it back to its original dollars. And the reason why I'm looking at it is because it does, in fact, have a negative effect on the library system as we know it now. They are currently, and we talk about broadband all the time, and it's going to be some years before we actually get broadband up and truly running. But right now, what's occurring within our library commission is they're doing upgrades across the state of West Virginia in all of our libraries. And right now, they are smack dab in the middle of completing those upgrades, and they do, in fact, need this money. Additionally, these are matching dollars that we're taking from them. The Institute of Museum and Library Services requires state matching dollars. These cuts will affect and put at risk funding continuing education for staff, resources for homeschoolers, and job seekers and lifetime learners. We need to help our libraries out, folks, because they, in fact, have helped us out through this pandemic. When many of our families were looking for a place to find a portal to get their kids logged in for school, it was a library or parking inside the library's parking lot that they were able to access their school system. Thank you, Mr. President.
The question before the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the Senator from Monongalia. Roll call has been demanded. Is demand sustained? The demand is sustained. All those in favor of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 12 yeas, 22 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present, and I declare the amendment rejected. Are there further amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senators Tarr and Trump move to amend the bill on page 41, item 50, line 9.
Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read, and that all amendments be considered as one.
Is there objection? Chair hears none.
This amendment changes 4 items. It removes the $300,000 for Mountain Stage that was added to the Department of Arts, Culture, and History, and it restores the majority of the funding for the Educational Broadcasting Authority, including Mountain Stage. This amendment would also apply the 1.5% reduction to this agency. It restores $10,544,730 to WVU. This is not a full restoration, but it puts the reduction in line with all the other 4-year institutions in the committee substitute and the agreement, Mr. President, that you had with the university presidents. It also restores $5,298,582 to Marshall. Again, not a full restoration, but honoring that agreement, and puts reduction in line with all other 4-year institutions in the committee substitute. Mr. President, I urge adoption.
Is there discussion? Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of the amendment. I'm so happy that we're doing this. I think it's really important. There were, I know, a number of members of this body that were nervous about the cuts to WVU and Marshall and public broadcasting that were in the budget. And I want to compliment the chairman of finance and the members of both caucuses in this House, who I think in a few seconds, are going to agree to restore that to the budget. Special compliment to the senator from Cabell, who was up on the floor yesterday talking about this very issue. I think what we're about to do, what I hope we're about to do, is very much the right thing, Mr. President, and I've been talking a lot today in other places, but I want to say here, one of the things as we work to try to move West Virginia forward, we have to have an educated citizenry. Our founders knew it and believed it, particularly Thomas Jefferson. And right now, where we stand today, we don't compare favorably. We have the lowest percentage of our population over 25 with bachelor's degree of all 50 states in the country. So cuts to our 2 great universities. Now this amendment does include a 1.5% cut, I guess, from the governor's proposal that all institutions are being asked to absorb or consider. But it's much better than it was 24 hours ago if this is adopted. I surely hope it is. I think it's the right thing for the state of West Virginia. I urge adoption of the amendment.
Is there further discussion? Senior Senator from the 5th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of this amendment. And let me say something. Just 3 or 4 years ago, we only had 1 Tier 2 university in the state in WVU. Since that time, WVU has reached Tier 1 status, and Marshall has reached Tier 2 status. If you understand what that is, that's a research status, and the amount of money that institutions can bring in and the amount of jobs they can bring in is very important. That's why the restoration of these budget cuts that were in the original bill are important. Both WVU and Marshall really play a major role in the state of West Virginia, and if we're going to have success. Now, let me talk about the area that the Senator in Cabell and I represent. We're on the upswing. If you don't understand that, you need to come down and see it. We've got buildings going on in terms of a restoration of the Fairfield community. We have the restoration of the American Car and Foundries, ACF. We have a new school of business at Marshall University. We're on the upswing. We've got the improvements in workforce development going on at Tri-State Airport. So I'm pretty bullish on our area and where it's going. And this restoration will help us immensely. Although I don't understand why we're talking about a 1.5% cut when we have possibly a $250 million surplus, but I urge the adoption of this amendment.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator from Putnam yield?
Will the senior senator from the 4th yield? The senator yields.
Thank you, Senator. I know you've been up several times. I want to understand, this amendment restores the 1.5% cut to WVU and Marshall?
It restores all the funding but 1.5%.
Say that one more time.
It restores all the funding except for 1.5%.
So they still have the 1.5% cut?
That is correct.
Okay. Does it restore any of the funding to our other small colleges and community colleges?
No, on this one, this is just the WU and Marshall and PBS.
This is the tax revenue that was removed from them in the budget. Is this the pop tax?
No, this is not pop tax.
Where did this revenue come from?
The pop tax has not been touched.
Okay. Where did this revenue come from before it was cut?
So in the introduced budget, there was a $12 million cut to, not introduced, in the Senate version of the budget that came out of the committee. There was a $12 million cut to WU, and there was a $6 million cut to Marshall that was contemplated in that budget. This restores those funds all except for 1.5% of their general revenue budget.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, speak to the bill.
Proceed.
You know, I certainly rise in support of this bill. Our higher education, it gets damaged, it seems like, every session that we come through here since I've been here. I will say, though, that the failure to fully fund at the very minimum level that we have failed to fund our other colleges, small colleges, and technical schools would be equally drastic and devastating to those schools as this cut would have been to WU and Marshall. If we truly believe in higher education, we truly believe in the economic benefit that higher education provides to every community where one of these schools is located, whether it's Fairmont State or West Virginia State or Pierpont or Glenville or any of those other schools on which every one of our communities so desperately rely, we should fully fund all higher education, at least at the paltry level that we've cut it to over the past 7 years. I do stand in support of this amendment, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the senator from Morgan. Roll call's been demanded. Is demand sustained? Demand is sustained. All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine, ascertain the results. On this question, 30 yeas, 4 nays, 0 absent, not voting. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The clerk will read the bill a third time. Okay. The bill will be engrossed. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill over one day while retaining its place on the calendar.
Is there objection? Chair hears none, so ordered.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2022, the budget bill making appropriations of public money out of the Treasury in accordance with Section 51, Article 6 of the Constitution. The bill is advanced to third reading with the right to amend.
Are there amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senator Tarr moved to amend the bill by striking out everything after the enacting clause and inserting in lieu thereof the provisions of engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 125.
Senior Senator from the 4th.
The clerk explained the amendment pretty doggone well, so I would urge adoption of the amendment.
Right. Senior Senator from the 4th requests unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read, which you just did. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Question is on adoption of the amendment. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the Senior Senator from the 4th. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The clerk will read the bill a third time.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2022, budget bill making appropriations of public money out of the Treasury in accordance with Section 51, Article 6 of the Constitution. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On your desks, you'll see a handout, multiple pages. Looks like this, says FY 2022 budget. So please note this is the presentation of this bill is what passed through committee. This does not include the amendments that we just went through. This presentation will be updated though after the floor session, and an updated version will be made available to all the members. On the second page, where it says Governor's Introduced Budget, the starting point in each year's budget cycle is the Governor's Introduced Budget. It indicates the executive priorities for spending anticipated revenues in the upcoming fiscal year. You'll see that total for this year was $14,567,847,045. On page 3, we get to the fiscal year 2022 general revenue summary. This page shows the governor's proposed fiscal year budget as compared with the current year's budget. The governor's proposed budget spends just over $24 million more than the current year's budget. As you can see at the bottom of the page, the Department of Revenue has projected $4,569,616,000 in general revenue collections for the fiscal year in 2021. The governor has appropriated, fiscal year 2022. The governor has appropriated every cent of the projected general revenue collections in his FY 2022 budget. So he's appropriated every single dollar, every single cent of the expected revenues coming in. Page 4, the bills that ran through the Senate that decreased the general revenue collections. Those two bills were Senate Bill 305, which was the airplane maintenance tax exemption. That eliminated $430,000 in taxes. The HB 2499 eliminated $1.4 million in taxes related to tax for arms and ammo sales and manufacturing. So the net gross change, or the net change to general revenue is $1,830,000. Page 5, the net changes to the general revenue. Slide shows that the reductions to the general revenue collections we have $4,567,786,000 left to appropriate. On page 6, it shows the decreases to the governor's introduced budget. The first two lines are discretionary cuts to the Supreme Court. They have reappropriated money $17.22 million in total. The emergency fund was put in place last year due to COVID, but that has not been needed due to federal fund reliefs. The asterisk next to the item indicates that it's being moved to surplus, which will be discussed in a later slide. The auditor volunteered the funds on the auditor line. Which is about a $420,000 reduction. And then the economic development current expense line reduction takes out the money that was included for one-time projects in the current year's budget, including the Eastern Regional Airport, the Advantage Valley, and Tech Connect. The directed transfer line is for the proposed closing fund. It also moves this to surplus. The Local Economic Development Assistance, or LEDA line, is money that was set aside for funding small projects, such as we discussed earlier with seniors. Senate Bill 682 transferred the funds set aside in the current year's budget to the Governor's Civil Contingent Fund, and no further funding is needed for these projects in fiscal year 2022, just because it's moved to another spot for use. The $80,000 in education takes a one-time funding for career exploration tool. That was a one-time, it was supposed to have been a one-time spend, Mr. President, but it showed up again in this budget. The LEDA money within the education part is the monies that are also moving in the Civil Contingent Fund to give more flexibility in spending for when we have local economic impacts in our districts. Jobs and Hope, the vocational division, has reappropriated money left in their accounts, $4,752,000. And what that means is, because some of the people who may not be familiar with the budget process, is that when money has been appropriated, some of these lines have the ability to have reappropriated funds. It's like an individual line surplus, and that surplus can build and build and build. And at times, when there's an improvement or even just an appropriation that's made for this fiscal year that is significantly less than what's in the reappropriated account, it can be deemed not necessary for this budget. The EBA is the discretionary cut that we had, just an amendment to restore that just earlier, except for the 1.5%. The $200,000 from the Division of Health takes out one-time funding from the Potomac Center. The Consolidated Medical Services, the Jobs and Hope line, also has that reappropriated money that I was telling you about of $5,830,000. Mark Train is a discretionary cut. And the LEDA money within the seniors, which we discussed earlier at length as well, is part of the monies that are moved over into that civil contingency fund. It's just a different place to get them from than one line. It was moved from one line to another, but still available. The cuts to WU and Marshall were also discretionary. That's also the amendment we just had just a second ago to restore all but 1.5% of that. The claims adjustments are only estimated in the governor's budget and must be adjusted each year with the passage of the claims bill. Finally, we asked the agencies to recommend cuts of 1.5% to their general revenue budgets. Before we leave this slide, though, please note that the total cuts to the budget are over $83 million. On page 8, the next three slides show where the 1.5% agency cuts were made. I'm not going to go through every line on these, but you can feel free to look through and ask questions at the end of the presentation. On page 9, the largest cut in this list is the medical services Medicaid line for just over $8 million. This money is actually moved into the surplus section of the budget. On page 10, you can see at the bottom of this page, the agency cuts totaled about $21,239,506. On page 11, this slide shows the improvements that have been made to the governor's introduced budget. First is the public defender line. The public defenders were passed during the recent public employee raise. And so this is a $1.65 million. That equates to a 10% raise for the public defenders, which is what other public employees receive from those increases. The next line represents the annual adjustment in the school aid formula. This number more accurately represents the money that will be sent to the counties for education. The mountain stage has been removed from in the budget that was passed from committee, has been removed from the Educational Broadcasting Authority, moved into the Division of Arts, Culture, and History in an amendment we just passed a minute ago that has been restored back to its original place, just with, and has the 1.5% cut to the whole EBA associated with that, if that's where they so choose to pull it from. Also, as an improvement to the sexual assault prevention and health right-free clinics, these are discretionary spends. Those improvements for the sexual assault prevention, that is a $550,000 improvement to the governor's introduced budget. Next line is a direct transfer to Casa. This represents the interest of children in legal proceedings. Casa is a child advocacy group that their money was sitting with in the Supreme Court. We had to find a different spot just because of a bit of an ethical conflict that they had reported to them for having the money there to appropriate. So that was moved over into the DJCS line. Finally, there's $3 million that had been given to the Chancellor of the CTC to use at her discretion. The discretionary improvement total is $8,729,426. Page 12. From the $4.57 billion available in our adjusted general revenue, the proposed committee substitute cuts more than $83 million, but includes $8.73 million in increased spending for a net decrease of $74.71 million from the governor's introduced budget. With the decrease in revenue taken into account, $72,881,663 is left unappropriated. Page 13. This slide shows the final general revenue totals in the current budget year, in the governor's proposed budget and in the Senate's proposed budget, if you want to see a side-by-side comparison. The Senate's budget is $57,445,605 lower than the budget of the current fiscal year, and $79,881,763 lower than the governor's proposed budget. Page 14. The following are changes to the special revenue section of the budget. The $100,000 placed in the Supreme Court budget for the transfer to Casa has been removed. The spending authority for the MARC train has also been reduced. The increased spending authority accounts for SB 61, which created a voluntary program for coyote control. Finally, one new fund for decommissioning wind and solar plants was created with the passage of Senate Bill 492. Page 15. Page 15, we're getting the state road fund changes. This gives extra spending authority in the state road fund. The first is based on legislation that has passed the Senate, which is the hold on a second, here just a second. With Senate Bill 345, it expanded the alcohol test and lock program. It was $20,200 in increased spending authority. And the second one is within the DMV for web-based vehicle registration system. And that would allow them to replace their outdated web-based vehicle registration system, and that's $5,554,000. Page 16. At the end of the year, any revenue collections above and beyond the revenue estimate are considered unappropriated. By code, half of this money goes into the rainy day fund. The other half is considered surplus and can be used to fund surplus items in the next year's budget. The surplus items you see here are listed in the order of priority, meaning that the surplus funding will be directed to the first item, and then if there's more, it'll go on to the second, and if there's more, it'll go on to the third, and so on. That continues until the surplus would run out. There are no items in the lottery surplus, and the $800,000 for the racing commission in excess lottery surplus. So in that prioritization, you'll see number 1 is setting $14 million to the Milton flood wall. Number 2, $7 million for tourism. Number 3, $5 million to the closing fund. And number 4, $8 million in medical services. That's the one we moved over from Medicaid. Page 17. This increase is is an increase in the federal spending authority. Will provide the department the ability to disperse additional federal grants received from the American Rescue Act. And you can see it's a fairly significant amount that West Virginia is not really used to there. That is $781,778,188 that is dispersed to us from the federal government for the State Board of Education. Page 18. Finally, this is a comparison of the entire budget. The total spend in the Senate budget is $15,271,498,578. You may notice that this looks significantly larger than the governor's proposed budget. This is because of significant increases in spending authority due to the federal funds that are coming into the state, just as I just mentioned on that 700 and some million one. As mentioned before, the Senate's general revenue budget is significantly lower than what the governor proposed. Mr. President, that concludes my presentation, and I welcome any questions and urge adoption.
Thank you. The question is on the passage of the bill. Is there discussion?
Question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 24 yeas, 10 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those elected to the Senate having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
The Senior Senator from the 17th moves the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on the passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question, 24 yeas, 10 nays, 0 absent, not voting. More than 2/3 of those elected to the Senate having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill effective from passage. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House. Miscellaneous business. Senior Senator from the 17th. Subject to announcements.
Thank you, Mr. President. Subject to announcements, I move the Senate stand adjourned until tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Are there announcements? Senator from Oregon.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on the Judiciary will resume its meeting in 10 minutes in room 208, West Wing.
Are there further announcements? If not, the question for the Senate is the Senate stand adjourned till tomorrow at 10 a.m. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate adjourned.